Hey, this is Ethan, and in this video I want to just talk about trauma. Just to preface this immediately, I'm not a therapist. I don't have like a degree in psychology or anything like that. I don't have any certifications with mental health or anything really. I'm just some guy that likes to think about things, and I recently went through what I would define as a traumatic event. And so as a result, it's been really like on my mind, and I just wanted to express what I've learned so far as sort of a way to help me personally process what I witnessed and went through, but also to hopefully like help someone who happens to run into this video. So recently, without going into too many of the details, I saw a man get shot by a police officer and die like on the spot. And it was a pretty heavy thing to watch. I know that like there are a lot worse things that have happened to people in life, you know, like I could be a kid in Syria that has to go through that, or I could be someone in the middle of a civil war, a refugee in the middle of a civil war somewhere else in a different part of the world, or just like countless amounts of other traumatic things could have happened. But nonetheless, like I don't want to deny the fact that this event left an imprint on me. And what's been interesting to observe is that traumatic events, they leave an imprint not just in our minds, but also in our bodies. I mentioned this in one of my other videos, that I'm a type 1 diabetic, and with having diabetes, like one of the things that's really helpful for managing the disease is always having like a very high level awareness of my body. And what's interesting is that after the event took place, I started feeling parts of my body like get tight and constricted, and it was most likely having to do with the fact that I just watched someone die. Like, I don't know what else it would have been, but it was interesting because I'd never really witnessed firsthand that trauma isn't just like a psychological thing, but it's also very much a body thing. And I don't know, like, I'm not sure if anyone who's watched this has looked into something called breathwork, but I've researched breathwork in the past, and I'll leave the video that I'm referring to in a second in the description below, but breathwork has been used by various cultures around the world as a way to like heal through, you know, emotionally damaging events. And so I figured, well, you know, I've never done breathwork before, but I'll give it a shot. I'll see what it's all about. And it was so interesting because as I was doing the breathing technique and I started getting breath into more and more parts of my bodies, like the part of my body that constricted, which was like right by my sternum, I literally felt breath getting like shoved into that area, and after I was able to get air in there, there was just this like huge emotional release, and I just wept. But it made me realize like, wow, like trauma is not just a mental thing, it's not just a psychological thing. And while, you know, therapy and going to a psychologist is absolutely a critical part of the healing process, I don't think it's the entire process. Like I think there is an element of the body that we have to acknowledge. But I also realized, despite having a really awesome release doing the breath work, that this whole event, this whole healing process is gonna take time. Anybody who is dealing with trauma, like you cannot expect yourself to like heal immediately, or even, you can't really even dictate how long it's gonna take. Like you're going to heal at whatever rate and pace you're gonna heal at. And I think practicing patience with yourself and practicing acceptance for whatever you went through is critically important. You know, like healing takes time, growth takes time. You wouldn't like dump more water onto a flower that is just growing. Putting more water, putting more tension onto the flower and not letting it grow at its natural pace might actually impede its ability to grow and prosper. And it's really the same thing with trauma. Like I view trauma as, you know, they are wounds in our psyches and to a lesser extent our bodies, or sometimes depending on the event, it could be a very physically traumatic event. So in that case, very much the body. But I imagine psychological trauma to be sort of like fertile ground for flowers to grow in your mind, kind of. I know maybe that's a weird metaphor, but basically like when we go through a traumatic event, there is an opportunity to grow there, but you have to be patient with yourself. And you also have to be willing to face like the pain that it's gonna bring up. And that's another thing, like for better or for worse, with trauma, when I was doing the breath work, for example, and the emotional surge that accompanied it came up, like I had to face the memories of the man falling down onto the ground. Like I had to like lean into that fear, lean into the fact that I didn't want to face it, but I had to anyways. And no matter what kind of trauma you've gone through, to heal from it, you have to face it. And I feel guilty saying that because I do acknowledge that what I went through isn't as bad as it could have been. Like I fully acknowledge that there are literally millions of people that have been on this planet that have probably gone through worse things than what I went through that day. Hands down, actually, I know for a fact there are literally millions of people that have gone through much worse than anything I went through. But in order to heal from that, we have to acknowledge what happened to us. And this sort of relates to my last point, which is that to heal, like we have to love ourselves. We have to specifically love the part of ourself that went through the event. So if we are not leaning into the event, if we're not acknowledging the presence of what happened to us, then we can't actually heal from it. Because self-love isn't just loving the parts of ourselves that we like. Like self-love is loving the parts of ourselves that got damaged from the event. It's okay that, for me, it's okay that I didn't want to see a man die. It's okay that I actually felt guilt over watching this man die. I felt guilty, like I felt powerless, that I couldn't do anything to stop the situation from happening. I felt guilt over the fact that like I was just a fucking bystander just watching as this event happened, and like I literally couldn't do anything. As irrational as that is, I had to lean into those emotions and acknowledge them for what they were. And I think, you know, like I said, I'm not an expert by any means psychologically. I just like to think about things. But it seemed to me that in order to heal from trauma, no matter what the content of the trauma is, we have to be willing to face it. We have to be willing to love it in a sense. We have to be willing to love the part of ourselves that went through that. Because if we don't love the part of ourselves, if we don't accept that part of ourselves that went through the traumatic event, we won't be able to move past it. And if we don't move past it, then the trauma will continually affect our experience in subtle, sneaky ways. You or me ignoring what we went through, it's not going to make it disappear, and it's not going to mean that it doesn't affect our behaviors. It just means that it's going to affect our behaviors in ways that we're not even conscious of, in unconscious ways. In order to heal and in order to grow, we have to accept and we have to love who we are now, if regardless of if we feel damaged, and we have to love the part of ourselves that got damaged in the first place. So that's really that's what's been on my mind. If you liked the video, hit that like button. If you like this style of content, I guess this is sort of abnormal for my normal stuff, but if you like this style of content, please subscribe. And if you have any thoughts or insights or ideas that you would feel comfortable sharing in the comment section below, please comment. I'd be super interested in those as well. But other than that, that's it. So yeah, until next time.